All right, well, we are starting our ride and already passing a whole bunch of old cars, extras. Looks like they're filming a movie. I think it's, I don't know what movie this is. Maybe like West Side Highway, West Side Story. Something. Anyway, I'm starting off. This is kind of the first episode, if you will. It might be very short-lived, of me sort of narrating my commute into work, riding from Harlem down to Chelsea. I take the West Side Greenway, and I'm going to kind of talk through some thoughts and things that I see along the way. I have a GoPro Hero 7 Black mounted on my helmet. Door. And I'm going to ride on through here. This is Frederick Douglass. Sorry, this is Manhattan Avenue. Pretty terrible street, lined with parked cars. If there were no parked cars, there'd be plenty of room for a gorgeous protected bike lane. But instead, the city values parked vehicles over the safety of cyclists and, frankly, pedestrians, because these are really unsafe areas. Going up 110th here, or rather west on 110th. So here's a painted bike lane. This is worthless. Right now it's pretty open, but most painted bike lanes in the city tend to be blocked at some point or another, even if it's for a minute. It doesn't really matter. It just takes any kind of thing blocking it or obstructing it to make it really unsafe, because then as a cyclist you either have to stop or go around, and it just makes it a much more dangerous kind of setup. So this is one of the most typical but really terrible intersections. You can see that there are massive trucks coming through 110th Street. 110th Street is a major route for trucks. So you can see up here coming down this hill, a bunch of big trucks, a bus. You get, these this isn't even as big a truck as I've seen. Typically you see the 18-wheeler massive trucks. I've seen a truck go through the roundabout down 2 blocks down that way, and blow a tire. It was terrifying, and it could have killed somebody. So here you kind of have this weird left turn that you can go down, but as is typical in New York and America, is all the drivers basically have tons of right of way. They can just make left turns through green lights. They can go anywhere. So you rarely have these kind of clear, protected traffic signals that clearly delineate, it's red for all drivers, so they are not moving, and it's green for all pedestrians or cyclists. This is a traffic pattern you typically see in more civilized places that value the lives of those who live in their city who are not encased in vehicles in metal. So this is the Columbus Avenue protected bike lane. It's pretty good, but I'm going over these bumps and stuff. This is a really interesting intersection right here. I want to make a right turn, and you'll notice that this just goes straight. It turns into a mixing zone where clearly this guy is parked, but there's actually no place for me to wait here. I guess this is the safest spot, but it's also a really bizarre place, right? It's not a safe area. This is clearly meant for cyclists that are making the turn, or us going straight through. Here you have another Cisco truck unloading, blocking the bike lane. And so yeah, one of the things that I think is really interesting is it's one thing to get like these bike lanes and stuff, but it's another thing to deal with intersections correctly. So you could have seen up there, back there, I want to make a turn. Turns can be very, very deadly and really dangerous for cyclists, but really everybody. I mean, intersections are terrible for drivers because you kind of have to like look for a gap and then you sort of try to estimate if you can make it or not. But imagine doing that on a bike. A lot of times you don't make it, or you make poor decisions because you're just not, you're just not able to judge things very well. And so if you compare this kind of an intersection right here to the kind of intersections you see in the Netherlands, where they have protected intersections, they have much larger areas for pedestrians to wait, and then on top of that, like much clearer pathways for cyclists. So imagine this whole thing is protected here, but if I wanted to make if I want to make a right turn, it would just lead you straight into the right, a protected bike path right that way. But the typical kind of patterns you see in places with really strong bike and pedestrian infrastructure is that when they're sharing the space with cars, there's things like bulb outs, large areas where pedestrians can wait. There's concrete. You rarely see really large kind of just some vague paint on giant asphalt like this. Here's a guy just in the bike lane. That's great. That guy back there was parked outside the bike lane, so that's I want to give kudos to him. Thank you for that. And then of course 5 seconds later, I'm not in the bike lane. So here I'm kind of illegal here, right? So I started crossing this intersection with the walk signal, but I actually had a red light. And that's something that the city is changing, but it's kind of the stupidest rule, is that as a cyclist, I have to sort of follow a red light that doesn't really protect, it actually puts me in harm's way, because I don't want to be riding with cars as they start from a green. I want to go and get a head start, typically, and the way you get that is by those leading pedestrian intervals, or LPIs, which is where you see those walk signals that show up maybe 15 seconds, give you maybe 10 or 15 seconds right before those lights turn green. And I just do that as a normal kind of, that's how I ride. I don't care. I'm like, if I get a ticket for doing something that's the safest possible thing for me, and I'm not hurting anybody, I'm not blocking, I'm not like going through intersections. So here's another example. All this car traffic is stopped, but it's actually the safest for me just to go through like this, even though I did have a stop, a don't walk signal. I don't know, I could be ticketed for that, but I've never been ticketed. So now we're on, where are we? We're on Riverside. This is a pretty awful street. I mean, it's a beautiful street if there were no cars on it, or very few cars, or cars that only went 15-20 miles an hour. Here you see I'm just going to go through this red light. That is completely illegal in New York City. I would get a ticket for like 180 bucks or something. I've never been ticketed again, but I only go through red lights in those configurations where clearly, like, you have a wide view. These are wide streets. You can see that nobody is walking. I'm not in anybody's way. I'm not failing to yield to a pedestrian or anything like that. And so here this is where I cut in to get into the West Side Greenway. This is kind of like a mixed path with a texture that sort of slows you down quite a bit. Very shaky. But with almost no signage. So one of the really interesting kind of missed opportunities here is to make these streets. Yeah. To make these streets like clear for cyclists. It's not clear that this is a cycling path, although slow. There's also frequently dogs, elderly, all kinds of people walking as they should. This is a shared space here, but there's nothing really that, like, you can just see it's all blacktop. There's no paint, there's no lines, there's nothing that says there might be a cyclist that comes through. It doesn't say that it's illegal for cyclists to come through here, even though it is. It's all cracked here, you can see. These become like really big puddles. In the winter, this is really kind of scary because sometimes they don't really clear it, and it can get, really slick down there. I don't know, some of the most dangerous rides that I've been on are when I'm riding on snow and slush. That was pretty scary. There was nobody around. It was like nobody was gonna hit me, nothing was gonna happen, but I was just gonna fall on my own. And that was right here in the winter. But only dangerous because they did not salt it, they didn't clear it, there was just nothing, it was just slush. And that's, I think, very important to recognize, like, where these dangers come from. It's from maintenance. A lot of this is maintenance issues. So right here is a great example of really poor maintenance. You have this stupid little like mirror that doesn't really serve any purpose. You got a whole bunch of bumps here. You got kind of a blind curve here. And people walking as they should, but then again, these blind curves. And you might say, okay, well, the cyclist should go slow. That's true. But again, there's literally no lines, no clear direction for anybody. So you're kind of left to navigate on your own. And for the most part, that's fine, except when it's not, and then they blame, then you blame the cyclist or blame somebody, the kid for running out or whatever. And it's just because a lot of this stuff is just really inconsistent. It's not clear who should go where. And so here it's just kind of an open path. I like this. Just ride. You got the water here. Oh, she's got like a swimmy, what's it called? Like a styrofoam thing that if you extend it, it tells drivers how much distance they should give you when they're passing, which is something I've only seen in tweets, but that's really funny. It's very helpful. So here you have the Hudson River to the right. It's a gorgeous ride here. And so we're going to take the Greenway pretty far down 26th Street. It's generally quite calm. It is one of the top, I think the most used bike paths in North America. You can't really tell, like, it's not, unlike the Netherlands or Amsterdam, where when you're riding, you're kind of always riding with like a little pack of people, and it's kind of, you always have like little bike congestion. Here you don't really have that. You kind of have people either going way faster than you or just way slower, and so you're kind of like this, where you don't see people because it's extremely efficient. But there are areas where you have pinch points and all kinds of stuff. Obviously this is a Tuesday, it's a work day, so you're only kind of getting commuters right now, or people who like don't work or work late to get in a training ride or something. But typically I see a lot of commuters. So here's some faded yellow paint, white paint. It's like, okay guys, bring in the paint and repaint this, make it really clear, like which way everybody should be going. I think this is one of the big opportunities that New York City has, like take your existing infrastructure and just maintain the heck out of it. Take it, make all the bike lanes really smooth. Get rid of potholes. Tons of cyclists get hurt and injured. They don't die necessarily, but it's definitely a contributing factor to really dangerous injuries. It's just simply attributed to the quality of the pavement and the road. It's unexpected, right? As a cyclist, you kind of expect to have a path that you can ride on. It seems pretty reasonable. There you have some bollards, which is just kind of, again, a rare sight. It's like here and there in the city. Here you have this weird configuration where I think a couple cyclists like ride pretty fast through this area here, down on the water. And one time they hit a kid. Kid was in the hospital, didn't die. It was awful, I think. I mean, obviously it's awful. Cyclists really shouldn't be going fast over here, but instead of sort of dealing with it in a couple other ways, like putting down paint or clarifying things or putting down sort of pinch spots where it's like, we know how to slow cyclists down. You can put down rumble strips or whatever in front of the boat basin, which is where it happened. Instead, they just diverted all cyclists, 100% out over here into this really, really hilly section of the park. And like, look at this. This is an insane hill. I'm going up. Okay, I can go down kind of fast, but then look at this. Look how steep this shit is. Every time I see people walking their bikes up here, I see old people, you know, elderly people who like don't expect these kinds of steep hills. Like, look at, I'm out of breath. I'm out of breath already. I do this ride twice a day. And then on top of that, you have like, even up here where it's relatively new, they just stuck these bollards down here, but it's not even clear which way anything's supposed to go. So technically I have the right on the right side, and all cyclists coming back should be on the left side. There's a terrible bit of pavement. And you see all the time cyclists coming up just share the inside of those bollards, even though they're supposed to be on the outside. But the paint is so poorly done that nobody knows, and you can't blame anybody for, you know, you blame the DOT for doing such a bad job, or the parks, the state parks department or whatever, whoever maintains this, you know, this park. But I think it's the state, and these people like generally don't ride bikes. They have no clue what cyclists sort of deal with on a daily basis, and like they're not even like trying out their own paths or doing any user research. They certainly don't reach out to cyclists. That's something I hear a lot. It's like nobody is consulted for anything. And then you got these like steep slopes here into an intersection right here, where on the right you'll have kids, like Little League games and all kinds of things going on right here. So in a weird way, you've created other, like you've just moved the fast cyclists. You've taken people who normally wouldn't even bike that fast, but put them in a hill. Can't really control it. They're going to go a little faster than normal, and then they're going to hit the kind of areas with like Little League groups and stuff. And like, one way to slow down cyclists is just get rid of cyclists, I guess. And that's kind of the, feels like that's the tactic, right? It's like, all right, we'll give them fewer spaces, put them into these other areas, and then injuries will go down. It's like, yeah, that's true. Or, you know, you can create better infrastructure. So this is an interesting part of the ride. This is under the West Side Highway. I hesitate to call it a highway because it's not really a highway. It feels like a highway. People drive like it's a highway. I'm gonna yield. But the speed limit is actually 35 miles an hour if you check the actual posted signs up here. Obviously nobody goes that slow, that fast, that slow. But get down here, and this particular stretch of this path right here is great. You know, I mean, there's no lines or anything on it, so it's kind of funky. But when they repaved this stretch, this is one of the nicest parts of the ride. You don't even, I mean, except for these parked cars here, you don't even see cars, right? There's no car, you're not driving alongside cars, you're in a dedicated path. This is a like very common just to be totally separated from cars. Driving cars, totally separated is a very common configuration in like the Netherlands and in anywhere like in Europe, in Denmark, places that have real bike infrastructure. I mean, and there's lots of places in America, but it's pretty rare here to have like a nice, useful bike path. This isn't like some people are like just joyriding and kind of taking in the scenery, but when you're out here every day, tons and tons of people are commuters. They are getting to work. They are here to ride to work. They're going from A to B and they want to go as fast as they can. Not like speeding, but they want a direct route that's safe. And that's what this path provides. That's why I ride it. I don't ride on the street. I go out of my way to hit this one. But it's one of the kind of inefficiencies that we have is like, we have the West Side Greenway and then like nothing else. Like there's no path that goes through the city. So this is just a really nice flow. It's very clear, like this is where you never see, you know, occasionally you see joggers and some people walking, but like it's very clear, like if you want to run or walk, you go into the park there. But this area is for cyclists. Now here again is like a pinch point. This is where they come out, and then people are walking again, kind of in the path. Like I don't blame them. I blame the configuration. Then you got these giant leftover, giant concrete barriers that are just ugly and awful and create more like stress, right? Because if you make one wrong turn now, you may hit a giant piece of concrete that's sitting in the middle of the bike lane. This is a really weird, you know, this happened after the Halloween bike lane massacre back in 2017, and this was like sort of just the knee-jerk reaction to this by the state without any real consultation with any cyclists who use this path. Nobody was talked to, and then they just threw these chunks of concrete into the way. And it's like, yeah, I guess one way to solve this is make it so that nobody can really ride comfortably on this, and everybody kind of has to be really, really slow and only can go single file. Like, yeah, that's a solution. It's a solution. But now look to your left and you see, like, I don't know how many lanes, 12 lanes, 10 lanes of car traffic. And we'll pass a sign for 35 miles an hour. See if this guy goes. There's a cop. Let's see if there's a here's some traffic now. So let's count 1, 2. Children. Let's see. This is another intersection with no guidance on how a cyclist should like merge, and instead of putting up any guidance or any kind of infrastructure that could help cyclists, they just put up these bollards. So now it's like, okay, I guess I have to weave through when I go straight, but like it's really hard to navigate when you're making a turn through these things. Like, right, if you're coming perpendicular to them from over there and you're trying to make a left turn in here, you got to navigate through people and all this, but you can't make like a wide turn. You got to sort of thread the needle, and technically it's not easy. It's something that takes a lot of, but you got to be kind of focused. So here's this normal rush hour morning traffic. We decided to put a highway on the water and then never touch it. But I think I'm nervous enough with all the potholes and stuff just on a city bike, which can absorb quite a bit. Those little things have tiny wheels and you just can spill if you're not, you can't sort of evade anything, you know, because you just have kind of a stick with the wheel. It's very tight, not like, you know, just sort of driving around. And then you have these tiny little wheels that can easily get caught in any kind of cruddy pothole. But clearly they're gaining in popularity, so they must be pretty good. And it's great. I mean, all forms of mobility are good. You want 2 wheels good, 4 wheels bad. So here you can see the speed limit signs at 35 miles an hour. How many people go 35 miles an hour? I'm gonna go through this red light. Hope I don't get a ticket, but I am gonna stop at the next one. And again, they basically just outfitted car red lights with, and stuck a bike on it, which is odd. So they don't really work in any way for cyclists. Like the switch from green, I'm gonna go. The switch from green to red is really fast in the way that a car, you know, traffic light would work. Oh, here, this is a sign. Right turn, yield to bike and people. I'm sure that works really, really well. Go ahead. Like, signs don't work. Signs suggest things. And they only work if people, like, care, give a shit. If there's any enforcement, if there's any ramification, like, oh, if you do something wrong, something bad happens, you get fined, you get whatever. Like a serious, kind of seriously. And like, if you see it, like, you have to assume the drivers are not looking at any of this stuff. I've driven a ton. Like, when you're in a car, you just sort of see the road. You're probably looking at your phone. You know, you're doing all that kind of stuff. Okay. This is ridiculous because we have the right of way. But now we have to wait for this shit to get through. And here they've just blocked up an entire intersection. Meanwhile, of course, the highway is open. But then you get to enjoy like views like this, and it makes it worthwhile. Like, it's pretty awesome to live in a place. I mean, we kind of complain a lot, but it's because we want this place to be better, right? And I think you really just have to fight for what you want. City is like making a lot of good improvements, but I think the issue is really just the pace is too slow. You know, if they sped it up 10x, you might really see infrastructure improve much more rapidly. You have congestion pricing, you know, in the past. You have all kinds of projects and things in Central Park West, protected bike lane, but that took a year, you know, a year after a person dies, for DOT to study it, and then and then really all they're doing is just taking away parking spots and sticking some green paint. And like, sure, I don't want to minimize like whatever work they did, but it doesn't feel like that complicated to just say, let's do that, but let's proactively figure that out for all streets, for like most streets now. And instead of waiting for the next casualty, which inevitably will happen, because now we're at 21 cyclists killed in New York City, which is ridiculous. Last year, the number I think was 10, and it's only September, you know? That's Vision Zero. Vision Zero is flawed in New York, the way that we do it, because it waits for people to die, and then it reacts. That's effectively what it's doing. If it was done correctly, right, you would say, what is the safest configuration for streets? Okay, we have 12,000 lighted intersections. How do we make them safe? Let's do 6,000 intersection, you know, protected intersections now. Let's go through, create protected bike lanes and fast track every project and make a protected network of bike lanes. So here's a really good example, by the way, of making a left turn into this thing. Look at these stupid things sitting here. They should really be much further out, and they should be configured for the way that people actually turn into them. Here, like, I'm in this weird little bay area here. These giant metal things, a tiny little space here, and, you know, 3 lanes of speeding cars. Okay, they're not speeding because they're sitting in traffic because, goddamn, you know, we're a car-centric city. But I'm just one person. I'm sitting here, but I've been here. You'll see as the light takes 2 minutes to turn. This bay can only handle like a couple of people, so it's obviously not a scalable solution. It's not something that 5 years from now is going to work, or a few years from now, or now. If you have a larger bike, it's hard to get it in here. And then, of course, we have the indignity of cyclists waiting at the side of a highway for 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, or however long these lights are, breathing in all the fumes. And if you count the number of cars that are coming through, it's like not even that many. Being counted pretty slowly, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and it's red. This person just basically went through. They're not paying attention, and now I have a walk signal, but then all of these people here have a left turn only signal, which all they see is a left turn, so they fly through it. They're not even looking for cyclists. That's why these intersections are really dangerous. Now we're on one of my favorite quote-unquote protected bike lanes. Basically, it's not protected. I think the point is it's not protected, and it's really unsafe. Like, you just have tons of this kind of crap. Not only does it block the bike lane, it blocks the what would be the parking lane also. And then, oh, here's some green paint, and now I get to go back in and get blocked again. And this is every morning. And you know, we're in the growing pains right now. Here's the guy who's blocking the intersection, so you can see the line is behind him, but his front wheels are in the middle of the crosswalk. That is called blocking the crosswalk with a walk signal. This is the kind of behavior that everybody has to deal with. One of the interesting things is that all cyclists and drivers are pedestrians as well, right? The idea that like a pedestrian, you're like defined by the like the mode of transportation that you're in is funny. This funny way of phrasing of things, right? You're only a cyclist when you're on a bike, right? You're a motorist, though, if you are driving, but everybody's a pedestrian. Like when you park, you become a pedestrian. That is the definition, right? Okay, here's what we're doing. And so you would think that all drivers would be in favor of infrastructure that keeps pedestrians safe, because they're always going to be pedestrians wherever they park. Even if they park in front, they still have to use a sidewalk. They cross the street, they load their kids into a taxi, whatever it is. So you would expect that you'd say, oh, well, let's save the lives of pedestrians. Pedestrians, meanwhile, I think 70 have been killed. 70 pedestrians are dead this year in New York City. And when you see some of the videos of how they get killed, it's absolutely just, I mean, it's always awful. But when you see that it's like they're walking on the sidewalk, they're walking in the crosswalk with the light. They have the cross signal. They're not running in the middle of traffic like this. Like people just created that image of like kids just sort of running around in the middle of 12th Avenue. But that's inaccurate, completely inaccurate. What happens is much more likely is you have someone like this crossing with the signal, they're moving slowly, they're walking, they're doing everything right, and then drivers, because they have green lights and they're not paying attention, make a left turn or a right turn, and then they hit them. And the thing is, you don't have to be doing 30 miles an hour to kill somebody. There was that kid, you know, who was on the sidewalk, and the driver just pulled out from a parking space, and you could see they couldn't have gone more than 10 feet, 5 feet. So they could not have gotten even up their speed. You know, it was probably like 5 miles an hour, 3 miles an hour. It doesn't matter how fast a car is moving. When it goes over your body, you are dead. And, you know, those are the kind of things that we need to be much more proactive about. You don't just wait for dead bodies to pile up. So here you have a mixing zone off of this protected bike lane. You can see it's not really protected, but there's this space. This is one of my favorite parts. This is kind of the end. This is one of my favorite parts because it's a nice wide area here. It's smooth. The drivers here typically are well within their parking spots, well within their lines. They're not, you know, jutting over into the buffer and, you know, doing all kinds of shenanigans and encroaching on the space that we have. And so here's kind of a funny configuration. I do something kind of dangerous. I just turn this way. I don't make it all the way to the end because I'm going to dock my bike here. And if I go all the way here, then I risk kind of hitting somebody, but I can merge more easily when I just look. And that is my ride. Thanks for joining. Hopefully I'll do this again tomorrow or later today.